Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session today. As Ethan said, changing the game, reaching high value audiences. I'm Elise Perlmutter with Ampersand, and I lead the healthcare vertical on our client partnerships team. Adam is our Director of Global Media Capabilities at J&J, and Nora Wolfe, SVP at Universal McCann. Thank you both for joining. Why don't we start with roles and responsibilities? Adam, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Elise, and thanks to the team for inviting us today. Excited to be here. Like Elise said, I lead the global media capabilities team at Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health. We're obviously quite a large global organization with our local brands and markets ultimately deciding what makes sense for their budgets on a day-to-day basis. And the global team really is here to, like the title, suggest, build capabilities and best practices that we can roll out to the markets and really enable a level of service to what they're looking to do with their brands. So we've over the last year have built out kind of I like to describe it as a bit of a team of specialists, focusing on certain channels like programmatic and search and social, areas like brand safety and media data governance, build that as a bit of a central team, but ultimately, like I said, enabling building some of the capabilities centrally and then rolling it out to our markets based on what their critical business objectives are.
Thanks, Adam. And you've only been at the company, what now, 6 months, coming from Hewlett-Packard?
Yeah, 6, 7, somewhere around there. Joined last summer, so still very much in the midst of building out the team. It's a new team in general, so a lot of building out the vision and remit, and still seeing that through to practice this year.
Great, Nora, tell us about you.
Thank you, Elise, and I echo Adam's sentiments. Thank you so much for inviting us to join you today. So my name is Nora Wolfe. I work at J3, which is an agency under the umbrella that is dedicated to Johnson & Johnson. And I lead the investment team, where our primary role is structuring partnerships out there in the media marketplace that can be leveraged across all of J&J's brands. So obviously we have a large portfolio under the Johnson & Johnson umbrella. And so it is my job to, align our spending with the partners that can drive the strongest performance and the largest benefits for J&J.
Great. All right, let's start by talking about the high valued audience. Can you share what your definition of a high valued audience is and how you see them evolving? Adam, you want to start?
Yeah, I think in general for us, there's always some level of, we've not just demographics, but thinking about purchase-based behaviors or other intent signals that, would suggest that there's, a need for us to focus our investment, and ideally not just focus our investment, but think about what is the unique creative message value proposition that we're looking to put in front of them. But at the end of the day, from kind of a holistic media standpoint, we're very much accountable to ROI. So when we're thinking about our high value audiences, it's still based on that proposition of where can we deliver the most return on our investment, obviously with some level of uniqueness across different audience segments, but ultimately that's the basis of how we're thinking about it as a CPG organization, what it means to run high value audiences against our campaigns.
Nora, does that definition change by channel or platform?
Yeah, I definitely think that it does. I think, as Adam said, all of our high value audiences are rooted in purchase-based data. But I think that, we have the ability to create larger audiences by channel or really refine that and make it more niche. And I think that channels that are perhaps more premium or mass reach, you can benefit from a larger, broader audience, still built with that purchase-based data, but maybe at a category level versus some of the more efficient channels like programmatic, where we really want to redefine and narrow down that target as specifically as we can, because we've seen that drives really strong performance.
Got it. And Adam, does that change where you are in the marketing funnel?
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously, based on the channel and the level of specificity or accuracy that we can get with our data partners and our digital signals, that will change, and the construct of the funnel definitely plays into that as well. I think, for example, for those channels where we can pull in not just the more general purchase, past purchase-based behavior, but we can actually get some real-time intent signals, whether that's search or some of our other digital programs, that we can indicate that based on what this user is doing right now or in the kind of immediate past, that they're ready to purchase or in the process of purchasing, that we're able to tie that into not just reaching them again, but like I said before, what is how can we get more specific? Can we pull in some of our e-commerce capabilities, either with some of our retail partners, to actually push them one step closer? So definitely it's based on the funnel and what data we have access at that specific channel, where we're seeing them come through.
Got it. So look, we all know that the media landscape is changing, continued fragmentation, ongoing increases in streaming consumption. Just look at the last week's news. Can you share a bit about your strategy and how that has changed to kind of best engage your consumers, and maybe some of the challenges that you face? Either one of you want to take it?
I'm happy to take that one, Adam. And so I think, we've really shifted our approach to be more conscious of the consumer behavior, right? So we're not really talking about linear television versus streaming versus mobile. We're talking about how our consumers are, viewing that content, whether it's a video format or if they're reading that in a display format. And our goal is to make sure that not only are we reaching them where and when they're consuming, but also with the right ad format within the right environment, so that it resonates better.
Adam, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think for us, and not unique to us at all, obviously streaming represents a huge opportunity. One, just from the as compared to perhaps some of the other digital channels, the high impact format that it represents, obviously in line with the rest of TV, but paired with the digital capabilities that we can get from a targeting perspective and thinking about our high value audiences. I think some of the challenges have been to what we've been discussing around with the deep focus on ROI and the return that we're driving from investment, what it would take for streaming channels to compare from a efficiency standpoint to some of the more traditional digital channels. And there's some unique pricing elements there that we still are looking to figure out how to solve. So I'd say kind of from a challenge standpoint, it's more of that measurement standpoint. I think there's an inherent belief in ultimately we're trying to push from an investment standpoint, even if some of the measurement capabilities are going to follow with time, because we believe in the channel itself. But with that kind of heavy performance-based, ROI-based accountability that we have, there's more that we definitely would like to see there.
Is it different for digital than it is for television? And maybe what would that activation look like as far as a performance-based approach?
Yeah, I think from a broader, kind of moving past just ROI, which, we're always going to have, MMM or MTA-based mechanisms that are going to be a bit slower in nature, but we know are going to be the most, accurate in determining what kind of total ROI impact we're driving. What we're, from a more kind of agile performance-based model, I think what we're, in the midst of trying to define as an organization is what are the other more real-time, perhaps, set of signals that we can take to better optimize our investment on a much more frequent basis. We want to do it. I'd say we're kind of taking a cautious approach to it, because we don't want to introduce real-time digital KPIs that don't have a strong basis in predicting future ROI. We don't want to make decisions just for the sake of making faster decisions, but we know that there are digital signals, like I think attention measures have gotten a lot of conversation lately, and we're figuring out what our version of an attention measure could be. There's a lot of different definitions that are still floating out there. I think to your question, for kind of pure digital versus TV, there's going to be different ways that we can be talking about that, but ultimately, how can we get that richer set of KPIs in the hands of our brands, so that we can build a more agile ways of working in a more a faster insights-driven ways of working. And to that point, like what are the internal and agency side team structures that we need? What's the new ways of working? It's not just the measures itself, but how we actually structure our organization to take advantage of the the measures that we have. And definitely it's going to take it's going to take us some time to get there, but across each of the channels, we're in the midst of building out that approach to measurement, and then what the kind of surrounding ways of working should be to actually take advantage of that quicker to insight motion that we're asking for.
Great, thanks. Nora, did you want to add to that, or should I move on to the next question?
I mean, I think Adam really, hit the nail on the head there. I think that we do our best to take all of the, capabilities that digital has and apply it to the more traditional channels like television or print. And, the reality is there's a lot of manual work, right, that goes into that. So how do we structure our teams to enable them to use that data that we're getting more consistently in a way that is efficient and effective to our media plans?
So true. Okay, so what does a cookieless future mean to J&J? What are some of those operational capabilities and infrastructures that are needed to both, internally as well as your partners in the marketplace? Nora, do you want to start with this one?
I'll let you kick that one off.
Sure. I think there's a lot.
Potato.
I think there's a lot in the cookieless planning, but just kind of like the broader future proofing and what this will look like. And I think on the kind of more pure cookieless future question, again, I don't think anything I'll say is going to be surprising to any other marketer here, but we're certainly in a very heavy testing phase of what are the alternative identity solutions going to be in the years to come. And some are starting to slowly come to a place where there is a mechanism to test it. I think with some severe limitations on how much we're actually seeing in the new identity future versus still most of the transactions are happening from a cookie-based mechanism. But we're trying to do as much testing as we can possibly do, starting with our strategic media partners and what they're proposing as their identity solution, and seeing how we can scale that now and kind of get ahead of what we expect to be some of the options in the couple of years to come. But I think we all recognize it's way too uncertain to know which of these identity mechanisms will ultimately, quote unquote, win out and which ones will have the scale behind it. So we're trying to be as broad to our testing as possible. And then I think kind of taking a step back from just kind of the cookie replacement testing, I think for us, future proofing is also just thinking about what do we need to build as a capability that will also be alternative ways for us to invest or target our high value audiences. And obviously as a CPG organization, we have some room to grow as far as how we're thinking about direct to consumer relationships and how can we acquire customer data and what is the value proposition that we can provide back to customers to actually make them care or want to give us their information, so we can build those direct relationships and use that as a basis to not just build those relationships, but also thinking about from the future of our media targeting capabilities. There's a whole pillar and work stream behind those first party capabilities, and then also just I think streaming obviously, and some of the channels that we have right now that aren't as dependent on third-party cookies is obviously is going to be a huge investment opportunity in the future as well. Should some of the should we see changes or decreases in efficiency for the channels that are more currently more dependent on third-party cookies. So whether that's streaming or even some of our the traditional walled garden partners that are going to have their own solutions that aren't dependent on third-party cookies, figuring out how we can kind of scale some of that testing, scaling it to more social platforms, versus kind of the core few that we're heavily invested in right now and diversifying there. I think there's some just general diversification themes that we're thinking about, so that even, should some of these identity solutions not pan out as we're all hoping that they will, that we have a whole variety of opportunities for investment to replace what we might be losing out on in the years to come.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, brand safety is really important to J&J as well. How are you going to kind of accurately navigate this topic with your partners across, those media channels, and also to kind of ensure that your brand isn't limited with, inventory wise when activating those high valued audiences?
I can take that one. I think, brand safety is table stakes for Johnson & Johnson. It is something that, our partners know from the beginning is a top priority for us. And we want to ensure that we're running in content that really aligns with the corporate guidelines. And so I think we've seen the most success where partners have the technology to really automate that environment and to ensure that we can scale against our audiences in brand safe environments. And so I think that's an area where the marketplace is still evolving. Not everyone has the technology to really ensure that. So not only saying, we'll find those audience, but then being able to back it up with analytics and data that show where your ads have actually run. And the partners that are investing in that tech and really trying to innovate in that space are the areas where we're seeing the most scale and feeling the most confident that we're running in the inventory that we want to be around. Got it.
How important are some of those retail media networks in reaching that high valued audience for J&J?
I mean, they're extremely important. I think, our retail partners allow us to really reach our audiences further down the funnel when they're close to that conversion. And I think being able to, Adam spoke about ROI in the beginning, and attribution is huge for us. It's how we're able to determine success and to measure our partners. And so having the ability to tie back with these retail partners where we can really understand down to a placement level how our campaigns are performing, it gives us the ability to optimize those campaigns in a way that doesn't exist across the marketplace.
Yeah, and I might add there, I think it kind of fits within the broader theme of future proofing and just what our retail partners are building out from the future of their media capabilities, and talking about intent signals. I mean, we definitely see the opportunity on our retail data partnerships as really a core pillar of where we want to take the media model. I think there's a lot, not to name specific partners, but there's a lot of our strategic media partners that are more tightly integrating those retail data sets for us to use, say, in our programmatic channels. And while there's still a lot of testing and scaling that we have to prove out there, as it's kind of a shift from like more of the traditional retail model to integrating the retail model into some of our other media capabilities, there's going to be just a huge opportunity to get better deterministic signals, with our media buying, that we kind of, can build a true kind of more real-time full funnel measurement of media activation to sale, leveraging some of the second party data that we can get from those partners. So by no means are we there yet, but there's a lot of kind of that, the future of retail media and how that can, replace some of the reliance on third-party cookies and plays into like the full funnel performance mechanism that we're talking about. I think we're definitely really bullish on this opportunity and investing our time and building out those pilots with each of the retail partners based on what they're proposing and what they're putting out to market right now.
Got it. Yeah, and I mean, like thinking about currency attribution, there's a lot of discussion around Nielsen and those new forms of currency. What would kind of be your ideal choice, and what would that look like?
So I don't know if there is an ideal choice just yet. I think my hope would be that there's one standard, form of measurement across all channels that can deduplicate impressions and access the walled gardens that are still out there and limit our ability to manage reach and frequency holistically. And so, I think with the uncertainty around Nielsen right now, it's creating an opening in the market for other measurement partners to come forward and, pitch for the business. And I think, having evaluated many of them, they each have their pros and cons. And, what I think could unfortunately happen is that different partners are requiring different measurement partners. And so that would leave us in a tricky situation where it's already so fragmented. I think, the ideal, to go back to your question, the ideal is to have one source of truth that can truly understand reach and frequency across all channels and all partners.
That would be nice. It'll happen eventually. Okay, so since it's upfront season, can you share some thoughts about what you are experiencing? And did any of your learnings from your marketplace RFI that you hosted last summer impact what you're seeking to do?
Yeah, so I would say that there's two things there. So one, we've found that partnering with networks and platforms who are looking to learn with us creates a lot of opportunities. So whether that's structuring a learning agenda or doing measurement trials for us to work together to improve performance and innovate, I think is something that we're looking for more and more. And then I know we briefly spoke on this before, but what we've found is that, with linear television, there's pricing efficiencies for 15-second spots, and those are lacking in the streaming world. And in the pockets of inventory where we've been able to get that discount for J&J, we're seeing performance jump. And so that is something that we are pushing all of our partners to do so that we can structure deals where our brands can benefit from that.
Adam, anything else to add there?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So tell me a little bit about maybe some success that you've had where you tried a new tactic, whether it be addressability, incremental reach, and it went well enough where now you want to deliver that or continue it across, multiple brands. Is there anything that comes to mind of a success that you saw last year or that you want to continue this year?
Yeah, I'll talk on like the general, you mentioned it already, just the general theme of addressability, not necessarily something new that we've tested out, but and like you said, I've only been here for less than a year, so some of this kind of predates what I've seen, but just the idea of addressability and within our high value audience is really thinking about not just we know that we can with the best of internal and external partners reach our high value audiences, and thinking about the technical and operational side of what data partners are using to reach them, that we're spending as much time on really the messaging and what are we trying to distinguish as a value proposition to those audiences. And we've proven out both we've seen in just industry studies and our own internal data that by investing in addressability, we're going to see an X% return on our ROI figure. So that truly has moved past kind of campaign by campaign basis, but like what is our inherent ways of working in operations to get more of our brands and more of our teams employing a level of addressability into the creative that we're putting into market across as many channels as we can control. I think what we're now thinking about is potentially what additional external partners from a more from like a tech and platform standpoint do we want to stand up as the J&J best practice to make that ways of working even simplified, because we know it can get very complex very fast if we have many different tech partners in place on what that addressable creative process could look like. So that's kind of the immediate task that we're thinking about right now, of like what we think we need to get done to build a bit more of a streamlined global to local process for addressability. But definitely one of the pillars that we're going to be focusing on for the remainder of the year.
Right. So Adam, your client, Nora, your agency, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience listening in today come from both sides. Tell me how both the client and the agency best communicate to kind of new ideas and innovation, best practices, etc.
I mean, I would say it's having open lines of communication, right? I know we have, statuses multiple times a week with our clients, and we're really bringing them into the conversations from the start. And so that there's a clear understanding of the goals for the campaign, of the KPIs. And I think what's made our partnership so successful is that there's an eagerness to learn, trial and error, and take those learnings to improve future campaigns. So it makes it easy for us to be in this sort of test and learn partnership where we can go out into the market and learn, and then once we can prove out some of these tactics that we're testing, scale them across the larger portfolio.
Yeah, I think what I would add, I mean, there's a lot underneath that we could chat about. But I mentioned in the topic of the performance model, and one of the big elements within that is like, what is the ways of working? Like, what does the J&J structure need to look like? What does the J3 and broader IPG team needs to look like to actually allow us to have more of that real-time dialogue on performance and how we're going to optimize our investment? And I think for that model to work, like between client and agency, like Nora said, it's definitely, there's a deep desire to be, to have those work in progress conversations. And from the very outset of a topic, or whatever the topic is, to be a part of those conversations. We've done a lot of work on J&J side to invest in the team. Like I mentioned, my team is essentially new. A lot of our regional and local teams are also investing in their quote unquote specialist talent to actually be a deeper partner in some of that real-time conversation. But just having that level of transparency, kind of moving past expectations of buttoned up final products being shared out, but just having that a mechanism to see what's happening under the hood and optimize and brainstorm together what the future looks like, and take into account ideas that are coming from both ends, is going to enable the best working model between our teams.
Makes sense. Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this next question as the healthcare lead. It's one of my favorites. Tell me a little bit about how consumer expectations for health have changed. I was at a conference last week, and the big two buzzwords were trust and science. So if we learned anything from COVID, how are kind of some of those expectations changing in the health space? Adam?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nora.
No, by all means.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the topic of transparency, from a messaging standpoint, and I think a lot of our brand and product teams are just thinking about how we can get more of whether it's detailed lists into ingredients or other ways that we can just be as transparent of what products we're putting out there. Obviously, we have a certain lens, both I'm working predominantly on the consumer health side versus what our pharmaceutical teams are thinking, and obviously there's going to be a distinct point of view between the two sides. But from a consumer health standpoint, definitely in the spirit of transparency and using that as a way to build deeper direct to customer relationships. I mean, there's many benefits of that. We were talking about some of the future proofing elements of it. So we're kind of thinking about what it means for us to have those direct dialogues with customers. What are they looking for us? And I think, kind of grounding that in that spirit of transparency, and what we can truly offer our customers that perhaps our retail partners cannot, is kind of the basis of, how we're thinking about the future of not just the media model, but, just the kind of deeper relationship aspect of it as well.
Nora, anything to add there?
No, I think Adam, hit that. I think, he did mention, obviously, like it is a bit different on the pharmaceutical side than on the consumer side, but I think the overarching like goals for being transparent and making sure that we are, breaking through the clutter in a way that is both privacy compliant, but also in a way in which like our consumers want to be reached.
Yeah. And so if you really look ahead to the next few years, what do you think are some of those the biggest opportunities in the space, especially obviously J&J Consumer kind of separating to be their own entity away from med device and pharma?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, speak too much about that, and in full transparency, it's very, early stage on how that's, what it will mean for both sides of the company, post separation. But obviously, that's in the back of our minds and everything on like what will it mean for us to be, a consumer specific organization. I think the one thing that's still, and this might be a bit, repetitive to what I was saying before, but yeah, I think thinking about this industry will look like in the post third-party cookie phase, and all the different pillars of what that future proofing might look like. I think what's important to me personally is there's so much dialogue on what are those replacement opportunities for identity, thinking about all the technical and operational needs, which of course are critical to the future of what we're going to be doing. But I would hope, and what I haven't seen as much, just kind of across the industry, is not to over index on that side of the conversation, but also making sure that it's grounded on what do consumers actually care about, what do they want to hear from us about. It's not, they don't care that we want their first party data. They are thinking about why do they even care to have a conversation directly with us, as a suite of brands. So I just hope that there's as much focus on not just rebuilding what the cookie replacement is, but that we're really thinking about what types of creative, what types of formats are meaningful, what types of messages actually are going to break through the clutter, and that we don't lose sight of that as as an industry, and that we're dividing our attention equally on both sides of that equation.
Yeah. Speaking of creative, does creative messaging, does it vary state to state, or even if the target audience is largely the same, does your creative messaging change?
I would say that it does not change geographically. Normally, our messaging is pretty consistent. I think it's tailored to the audiences, right? So where we can be more addressable to that actual consumer that we're reaching is where we take those, where we make those changes on the creative side. But we don't really have a different national strategy versus the local markets.
Got it. Okay, so when I hear multi-screen, I hear duplicated audiences. How do we ensure that our efforts cross-screen are not hitting that same person and driving frequency?
So I think a lot of the work that we've been doing is to focusing our activity into a DSP that can help us manage that that oversaturation and that deduplication. I think, of course, there are still a lot of walls up that prevent us from doing that holistically across all of our partners, but we're seeing that if we can mitigate that waste and really redeploy our spends in places where we're finding a net new audience, it drives campaign performance. And so enabling us to do that is partnering with different DSPs or a DSP where we can truly see as much of that inventory as we have available to us and understand, did I hit Adam 5 times and now I'm going to reach him again in a different channel, or can I find someone new who's in market for our product and hasn't been overexposed to our creative?
Got it. Adam, anything else to add there?
No, I think that kind of covered it. Definitely, it's a focus for us, and I think definitely from a platform standpoint, that's going to be key on figuring out how we can just best answer those questions.
Great. I'm going to go into the chat and I'm going to see. I think we're kind of going into our Q&A, so I'm going to just look real quick. I just want to see, says, how are the current speakers dealing with end-to-end nature of processing, measuring these deals in the fragmented video landscape, since these audiences may not be considered currency? We covered that a little bit, but anything to add there?
I would just add that I think with streaming specifically, there's a huge opportunity because, as Adam mentioned before, it's not a cookie environment, right? It's based on device IDs and linking back to your targets, and advertisers that are using audiences built-in cookies and trying to transact on them in streaming where it's device IDs, right? There's a huge drop off. And so I do think that as we move away from cookies, there's an opportunity to not only improve the match rates, but improve the consistency across partners in terms of who within our audiences we're reaching.
Got it. Do we have any other questions in the chat? Just let me look here. I think those are not for us. So, all right, let me close that out. Any other questions? I think, no, we've got Ethan back.
Yes, awesome, you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Super interesting discussion. If you don't mind, maybe hang out with me for a minute or two. I had a couple of questions kind of creeped into my head, and because I'm your moderator, I guess I get to ask them. Adam, you mentioned early on that you're building out a team of specialists, and I'm really curious about how you balance the need for people who are specialized in all of these technical areas of marketing with the need for people to be well-rounded in a broad range of topics. I think that's got to be a really interesting challenge for you as you try to build out the team.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and definitely, I think, from a global standpoint, I think we have the luxury perhaps of being able to have specialists that are going to really focus on, say, one given media channel and help build best practices that can scale to the organization. But naturally, if you are looking at our regional and our local teams, especially those smaller teams in smaller markets that are not going to have that ability, it's absolutely, it already kind of is a balance of thinking about, like, what is that more generalized version of a skill set that, say, one of our market teams needs to have to be able to partner with Nora and the rest of the J3 org to obviously not have that same level of depth on one specific channel or one specific topic, but enough of a basis on what's happening across the board so that we can move, get to that point where J&J and J3 are partnering on that kind of real-time performance-based model. So it's to answer your question, it's going to vary depending on what part of the org you're looking at, and it's definitely it's a mix of both. And I think we absolutely recognize that what we're asking our local teams to build out and to be partners with us on is going to be a different model than what we're building ourselves at the global organization.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, that it's kind of different strokes for different folks based on where they are. Nora, could I ask you a similar question? I'm an ex-agency guy. I started my career on the agency side, and so I'm curious, as you hire people at the earlier stages of their career, how you train them to understand the breadth of everything that exists, everything that we talked about over the last 25 minutes. How do you possibly get people up to speed on all of that?
Well, it's definitely a challenge for sure. I think one of the ways that we're trying to sort of future-proof our talent is to give them exposure to campaigns from start to finish. So having the ability to learn from the pre-planning stages all the way through activation to the analytics enables them to be able to, hold their own at different tables. I think that it's forced us to be a lot more collaborative, where we're working with our peers in decision science and our peers in strategies a lot more closely than we were 10 years ago. So being able to, of course, have that expertise in investment, but then being able to lean on your peers in analytics to help you understand the data and the performance so that you are, a specialist, but also well-rounded enough to be able to help guide our clients and help answer questions that they might have, because, we would never want to have to ask 8 different people the answer to a simple question when we have teams that, do have the capability to understand it all while remaining sort of an expert in a certain field.
That's really interesting. It sounds like you're both going at it a similar way, that there's this idea that folks need to be broad and deep, I guess, for lack of a better term. All right, one last thing, and then I promise I'm going to let you go. Going to do a little game called Final Word. As we look to a future, if we come back together this time, late April next year, what do you think is the one thing that is going to make the difference over the next 12 months in terms of your ability to reach high value audiences? The topic of this conversation, is there something that you're looking for that you hope happens over the next 12 months? Nora, I'll let you try to answer that one.
Sure. I think for me, there's been a need for attribution measurement within streaming, right? And I think that we are finally at the point where we are close to having something that can actually do that for us. Whether it's Nielsen or another partner, I think it's too soon to tell, but my hope is in a year when we come back, we've found that partner and we're truly able to, prove out the value of streaming that as consumers, we all know exists, but I think as marketers, we're still waiting for the measurement to catch up.
Gotcha. Adam, what's your silver bullet?
Honestly, I'm not going to add another one because I mean, on this specific topic, of streaming, I think what Nora said is spot on. And, honestly, the biggest constraint that we have right now from doing more and what we want to see. So rather than add something else into the mix, I would focus on that. And I think that, once we have some of those deeper insights, then we can hold streaming to the same level of performance specificity that we can our other digital channels. That would be the game changer.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. Elise, thank you so much for leading this conversation. Nora, Adam, thanks so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it.